Dear friends, welcome to the very first episode of the first season of the Human Weave podcast. We are your hosts, Roshni and Yashaswini, and we are so happy to start this beautiful journey with you.
To begin our season, let's introduce ourselves. After all, you'll be hearing our voices throughout this film. Roshni, let's go with you first.
So, I work as a life coach. I have been in numerous professions before this. I started with journalism, worked as a content writer, instructional designer, volunteered in a school as a English teacher for some time, and now I finally found my calling through life coaching. I am from India, born and brought up in Mumbai. Been most of my life in Mumbai. It's only after my marriage that I first traveled outside of India and I got an opportunity to live in Mauritius for the last 15 years. And I think those 15 years have been very, very important and life transforming for me. I've learned a lot from this place. Though I loved Mumbai very much and still do, Mauritius will always have a very special place in my heart. Also, because most of my married life I have built here, and I have two beautiful children, a boy and a girl. Um, yeah, and that's where I am right now. What about you, Yash?
Me, I have a little unconventional journey. I am basically from India, so in India, like every other student has this option of you have to get into engineering or become a doctor. So that's the common norm that that was placed in front of me when I was in my student life. And yeah, just life went on with being an engineer, but I really didn't find myself being fit to what an engineer could do. So I was just figuring out life after my graduation. I was more clearer about what I don't want rather of what I want in life at that point of time. Actually, that made me figure out more because I knew what I don't want in life. That helped me narrow down spaces. I started exploring, and I always wanted to get into the human behavior and the psychology of it from my childhood. But the sad part is there was no guiding sources that could help me to end up there. I ended up in engineering just because I had good scores, which is I think pretty common. So while figuring out, I ended up with just like another certification that I wanted to learn in, and that helped me explore and research a little bit about, or you can still get into the psychology part of it, the human behavior part of it. Um, that helped me explore that side of me, uh, which helped me found that, which helped me uh, figure out that I like having human conversations. I was such an introvert. That's what I now recall myself as during my childhood and high school days. I think that's where I always stopped myself saying that, okay, I'm an introvert. I probably not fit enough to have conversations. But they say, right, you don't know until you explore and you figure out. So I was just like, okay, let's give it a try. And with the research I found I can still do my master's and get into psychology, being a therapist. So that's what I did. And I started to love having conversations. Like hearing their stories is like you being part of the journey, which was so interesting and so profound to have life lessons for my own life. So that's how I got into all of it. And right now I function as coach and therapist. And that's very fulfilling to just be there for another person and part of their journey.
Yeah, I think that is why coaching is so close to my heart also. Um, that you get to be close to so many people, be that person where they can feel safe, right? And yeah, that's been the beauty of it. And when you mentioned that you were a introvert, I remembered that I have always been labeled as an extrovert. I always had lots of friends, and I think I really enjoyed that part of me. It came very easily for me. But at one point, I also thought maybe I'm an ambivert, because I do enjoy my own company too, right? Like, I can get that energy even when I'm alone. Yeah, but most people, if you look at it, I think most people look at me as an extrovert.
Yeah, I think now I've come to a space where I can say I'm an ambivert too, because I find myself being very close to some people and I'm okay being alone. I enjoy my own company also. So I don't know. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe I won't fit in one particular label. Probably it just depends on the situation.
Yeah. And it's also about where you get your energy from, right? Like my husband always tells me that you can't live without people for long. But I always disagree with him. I think comes down to where you find your energy from. I'm sure introverts also have close relationships,
Mm,
just not as many as probably extroverts do. So it's interesting that we started introducing ourselves and went
mm,
into the conversation about extroverts and introverts, which brings us to a very important part of this podcast, the
mm,
human weave. Why we chose this name and what it really means. Yash, would you like to start
mm.
telling about that?
Yeah, I'll just go with a little bit of context on how we started for our listeners to understand where we are coming from. Um, so, like at this point, we know each other for more than like 3, 4 years. So we've been speaking about this a lot, but this just happened, uh, not planned, but more of spontaneous action that we took. So it felt like everything fell into the right place and it just got weaved into a beautiful thing. And when it came to our connection, just like two human beings residing in different country and having different upbringing, different perspectives, different backgrounds. So it was more like two human beings coming together to form a beautiful thing. So that's how it got turned into the human being. Like we're all connected in a different sense with different unique qualities.
Yeah. And I would like to tell a little bit about the philosophy behind the
Hmm,
podcast also. That so me and Yash, when we connected, we are in the same fraternity of coaching, and that is what brought us together. But the fact that we connected somewhere about how we wanted to personally grow, there was a spiritual inclination that we as individuals had, and I think that was something that brought us back to each other again and again. For me personally, though I didn't have this name, the human weave, in mind, but I have been feeling this very strongly in my life, that everybody, everything in nature is connected to each other, and science also in so many ways says that, right? I started over the years kind of living this philosophy, and it became easier. It became easier to forgive. It became easier to understand others, not just people, but be more sensitive to the environment around us. And this philosophy was very attractive to me. I wanted to do something with it. Initially thought of a blog or something, but that never happened. Maybe it didn't happen because this is where it was supposed to come, and it was supposed to come with you. So the idea waited a very long time to come and form into the human weave. So the human weave is basically based on the philosophy that though we all have our unique identity, unique things that we bring to our existence in this world, somewhere through all that, there is something that joins us together. There is something
Mm.
that brings oneness among all of us. I think that is something I have felt, and from whatever conversations we've had, I felt that we have spiritually grown in that space. And
Mm.
we wanted to bring that idea to all our listeners.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think when we thought of, okay, let's do something on this, we didn't have like a proper plan to it. It just took off like something that was probably the higher energy that was guiding us through all the structure and the plan and how to connect. And now, when we just look back on how it all worked out, it feels like every other dot is connected very beautifully. We started exchanging conversations. It was
Yeah,
more than just the work. It was
yeah.
more of personal and, like you said, the
Um,
spiritual side of it. Yeah, more meaningful. And the conversation, each conversation went to a different depth that we didn't know that existed within us. We have differences, we have so many similarities. I think that's what makes the bond more stronger and beautiful. That's the bigger scale how we look at the world also. We have our similarities with other people and we have differences with other people also. The connection is real with people and it's beautiful because you get to learn so much from the other person. So I think the name fits in perfectly. I'm sure our listeners would agree to it also that what we are as human beings is because of how we connect with another person, right? So I think that's beautiful.
and especially in times when, we also live in a world where we are forgetting this essence,
Mm.
somewhere moving away from it. The emphasis has become more on the differences rather than the similarities, right? And it's just uh the idea of this podcast was also to bring more and more stories that every person who listens to can connect to in some way, maybe not just with their own life, sometimes with their own lives, but also with people they have seen around them, things that have influenced them, places that have impacted them, right? And every story there will be something that each person, if they want to look at it in that sense, can connect to.
Yeah, that's beautifully put, Roshni. I think whenever you listen to another story, probably that's not your life that you're living in that short moment of the conversation, but some part of you will definitely connect to what they're saying, what they're experiencing. And that's where you get to live that particular part of their life with them. Um, and that's beautiful for the reason that you can get to experience a different perspective than what you actually look at generally in your life. So such conversations are very meaningful for that reason because you cannot live 100 different lives, but it just gives you the opportunity to see 100 different perspectives. And I think that gives you more profound elevation to your own personality to see things in a very neutral perspective and not really be judgmental. Because that's
Yeah,
what I'm seeing while I'm having conversations with people. People are very quick to judge. But why does it happen? Because you don't see the perspective where the other person is experiencing. Probably these conversations will give that enlightenment about the perceptions the other person might be experiencing, and you are less judgmental or more informed before you give out a judgment about another
yeah,
person or about your own self, probably. We're always self critical. So maybe that will be good perspective to uplift your own self and your own personality, I guess.
yeah, that's true. And I like that when you mentioned that, those profound meaningful conversations, and sometimes these are also at the same time very simple conversations, right? uh, we move away from being aligned to our true selves so much Probably we are trying to raise our family, or trying to make something out of our
Mm.
lives through careers or education, taking care of our parents or children. And in that rush of life, we forget who we are. We move away from who we really are. And I think these conversations through these this, I think, will bring that somewhere, that an hour of going back to yourself. If you have ever wondered, who am I, or what am I doing here in this life? I'm just
Mm.
probably wasting it. It's that 1 hour, I think, is gonna bring them in some way back closer to themselves.
Very true. I'll just go back to my experience on where I started sharing about my journey, right? So I didn't know what I wanted because of that, because I was so disconnected to my own self. I didn't know what I really wanted. I was more aligned to what others wanted of me. That might be different roles that I'm playing for other
Yeah.
people around me in my environment, but what am I doing for my own self? What am I playing for my own self? What do I really want is where the
Mm.
disconnection was. So it took me a lot of time to figure out what do I really need. I think people are lost, like you said earlier, that they don't know what they want. They just go with the flow, and life becomes so mechanical because you're trying to fulfill the roles that you are in, and you somewhere lose your own self. That's where the disconnection happens. If there is some internal connection that you can radiate externally, I think that's where the alignment happens. And these stories will definitely help you have those internal conversations on, okay, what do I really want? Or have that awareness of, is this something that I'm really looking forward to? You can choose something out of the blue, but is it aligning with your own internal system? Is something I'm sure people will question when they start hearing these stories. So I'm excited for the conversations actually.
Yeah,
uh,
and I love that we came up with this format of having seasons, and
mm,
we are starting our first season. Uh,
yeah,
the name of the season is Stories of Connection, and again, that is something very carefully chosen. We had a lot of themes on our mind when we
mm.
wanted to start the season, but Stories of Connection is something we thought should be the beginning of our journey. Would you like to say what connection really means to you?
Yeah, that's a beautiful self-reflective question, actually. So, connection to me individually is more of what do you really want and what are you aiming to look at. It's more of your own self-connection, and connection with other people is more of how are you seeing them? Are you
Yeah.
seeing them as they are, or are you seeing them as you are? So we often we put in perceptions from our own lenses, which might not be the case with what the other person is experiencing. So connection to me is more of seeing people as they are and seeing their perspective of life. So in connection, if I have to say it, and just live on how it is at that moment. Yeah, being present, being very mindful of the whole thing, accepting the person as they are. I think that creates more deeper conversations, deeper connections, and deeper relationships, whether it's a workplace relationship or it's a personal relationship. I think it doesn't matter. The connection is the foundation of every other bond that you're experiencing. So that's my view on connection. How are you viewing connection, Roshni?
So I think it's so integral to our being, right? The word connection. I think everything in our body that we don't see, the internal organs and how our body generally functions, is because of connections. The nervous system connected to the brain, to the heart, everything is functioning through that connection, right? We don't really realize it, it is just happening. When do we realize it? when we fall sick or something's not okay, we are in pain, we realize there is a disconnect. Until then, we don't
Mm,
realize something is happening even inside our body. And I think that is something that reflects outside too. For me personally, I remember connection meant, I think it was first with myself. For me, it meant I wanted to be honest. I wanted to be myself. When I'm saying I
mm,
wanted to be honest, I did not want to show a mask on me when that is not what I wanted to really show. But as you grow up, that pressure that society kind of builds, you are very involuntarily taught how to disconnect from being your true self, right? And that is something I think I resisted a lot. And of course, that brought more pain because fighting to be connected to myself meant I was kind of disconnecting with others.
mm,
What you brought in earlier, seeing that perspective is so difficult sometimes for people. The social conditioning is so strong that just accepting somebody for who they are
mm,
becomes the most difficult thing to do.
mm,
You want people to fall into those certain molds.
mm,
Teachers want their children to students to fall into a certain mold. Parents want their children to fall into a certain mold. Children expect parents to be a certain way, like, until we grow up we think our parents are like god, like they can't make any mistakes, right? We grow up like that and we refuse to accept that we all do make mistakes, and those mistakes are what help us grow. So for me, connection is being as true as possible to yourself and everything around you.
mm,
And that could be even to not just to living things, but, you know, to your environment, or
mm.
where you live, the place where you're connected with. Your home becomes such a strong connection in your life, right? Like it's not just people we are connected to, we are connected to ideas, we are connected to values. So connection is actually such a important part of our lives that it almost feels strange that we can live a disconnected life.
Yeah, I like how you brought in the perspective of how we are internally connected with our organ system and the biology, the anatomy part of it. I think that's exactly how it happens with the mental aspects also, I believe. Like if there is some blockage to the connection that you have internally, it cannot really function. Like if there is some block, we'll experience pain or discomfort in our organ system. I think that's how exactly we function in every other
Yeah.
level of our life. Yeah, I think that is a beautiful example. I am curious about this. Is there a moment in your life where you felt truly connected to someone? Um, uh,
I think a lot of times I thrive on connections. I think when I mentioned earlier about being an extrovert, I think
mm,
that is also part of me, where I really like connecting to a person deeply. And I think I've been like that since I was a child. But in particular, I will talk about an uncle of mine, my mother's brother. He passed away when I was very young.
mm,
And the memory I had of him before that, I loved hearing stories as a kid, and he would tell me so many beautiful stories. And he, in turn, would ask me to share jokes with him.
mm,
I was really young, maybe, 8 or 9 years old. And I would share some silly jokes with him, and he would laugh his heart out on those jokes and really enjoy. And that used to make me feel very happy. So he tells me stories, I make him laugh in turn. And it felt like a good deal, a very special connection I had with him. And when he passed away, I was too young to understand really that he's gone.
mm,
I didn't want to accept. I remember my grandmother's home had a very big backyard, and he was cremated in the that same place, in our ancestral home. I remember coming there much after he was cremated. Like we couldn't come those days, there were no flights and also took us time to reach there. I remember going and sitting at that place where he was cremated, I felt an amazing connect to him, like I had not even felt before that,
Mm.
before when he was alive. And I think for most of my growing up years, I felt like he's there with me. I almost imagined having conversations with him. What would he try to think how he would reply to me, in that moment? I know this might sound like a very strange connection I'm bringing up, but this is the first thing that came to me when I wanted to think of a very special connection, because I think that was my guiding force in my early
Mm.
years, my childhood. So yeah, that's a beautiful connection. I still remember. I felt.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think it's very meaningful connection to you and sharing with our listeners. I'm sure they can relate it to their own life. To me, some deep connection that I experienced, right? So I've had so many connections before like that, but I never realized that it's a special one than the other ones.
Mm,
But I would want to emphasize on the one that we have together, which is probably I can relate it to more because I was more aware of the whole process with that. So we just started off naturally like any other peer colleagues that would really work together. So I think, I don't know, there was at least I didn't really expect anything other than just the professional thing when we just started off our conversations. I never had anything that, okay, this would really turn out to bond work relationship that we have together. But when I look back now, I think it just took off very smoothly, very seamlessly, with no attachments to it or no
yeah.
expectations to it. So it was just very candid and natural that it just took off. And I think it's because I could relate to how you work internally. Internal systems were very much similar, which I didn't really get that from many other people that I involved with. So the connection got deeper because of the vulnerability that you showed, which also helped me be more vulnerable because I'm not a person who really opens up very easily because of probably the experiences that I've had where people don't value it, people don't really acknowledge or appreciate, which I didn't feel that with you. So it was just very natural that in the flow relationship, just that beautifully took off. And the interesting fact is that you are in Mauritius currently, and I'm in India, and we haven't met each other in real life. So every other conversation was on Zoom, WhatsApp, texts, and calls. So I think that's where it's truly amazing to connect because I had this perception before that whenever I see, okay, online connections and all of that, I was thinking like, how can you really get connected to the online relationships, whether it's work or personal relationships? I used to always be skeptical about it, to be very honest. But after experiencing hours together and few other people that I met through work, I think it's just amazing. It's as novel as any other in-person
Perception
connections.
has completely
Definitely. So I was skeptical, and I now I can say it's just same. Connection is a connection. You cannot really define it whether it's in person or online. Probably I might not know my neighbors this much. I know you that much. So I think that's where the beauty comes in with the connection. So you can connect with any other person in the world if you resonate. And the distance doesn't really matter and it shouldn't really matter. I think that's our interesting story. That's my special connection that I have with you.
it's very special for me too. And to do something this meaningful, I think that connection was also very important. And like you said, it happened so organically. It took its time. We always knew there is something why we go back to each other, but then we never imagined that it would grow into something so meaningful in the future. We doing this podcast together also makes me feel that, there is so much more for us to explore together and learn about each other and learn together about other things. And that makes the connection even more special, right? Like, even without physically meeting each other, if there can be such deep connections that can be formed, it's worth thinking, why are we so disconnected with somebody who's right next to us? And this is, yes, online world has kind of made this very easy, but if you look at it, earlier too we were connected with relatives who were far away through letters. There were pen friends, which I found very intriguing when I was a child, to write to some stranger and then get a letter back. So, yeah, there were connections that used to happen in this way. Another place I have also felt where distance was not a matter was books. When even fictional characters you get connected to, but even when you read autobiographies of people who are long gone from this world and you feel connected to them, right? Yeah, so for me too, Yash, our relationship has been very, very special. I love the fact that even without like seeing you in person, my children already know so much about you and they love hearing my stories with you. Yeah, it becomes extra special.
Yeah, that's beautiful because I'm actually grateful for the online platforms. I have been able to connect to a lot of people, a lot of genuine people with uh, so much gratitude I have for such platforms for the reason that probably if not for these platforms that happened after the pandemic, I wouldn't have met all of them. If I had to just consider in-person conversations or in-person work setups, then I'm thankful whom all I could meet really through online platforms and have more deeper connections. They've really added so much of value to my life and
Yeah.
so much of profound insights that has really shaped me who I am today. And I'm sure there's more to connect to and more perceptions, more perspectives to add on to, which enhances one's own personality. I got to see my own sides of me, which I had never met. So I'm curious about my other sides, which I'm yet to meet. So that's gonna be more interesting. You know more about yourself. I'm sure you're also excited to see more sides of you.
Yeah, definitely. For me, even travel is not just about just having visited a place. I want to stay there. I want to be slow. I want to be very intentional. I want to talk to people. I want to eat the local food. I want to just sit and stare. Does the sky look different in this place, And sometimes it does. Even a sunset looks different, which you would imagine was the same everywhere. But no, that experience in every moment that we are experiencing it is different. There is so many ways you can feel connected. Yash, I wanted to ask you, have you ever felt connected to an idea?
Oh, very much. I think one was having like this, which brought us together, was more of conversations to reiterate about how I like seeing my own paths. That reminded me of one travel that I took to a place. So there, it was more of understanding about, okay, this is what I like. When you said intentional living, probably that place taught me to be more intentional. That's where I realized, okay, this is the kind of life I want, and that's something that added to my perspective on how I wanted to live forward in my life. So this idea, which has really given me more meaning and purpose, is to have more conversations, more human conversation, which has really put me into this profession with more of passion rather than profession. I would call it my purpose and my meaningful take on my life, being very intentional on it, on conversations. That circles back to our podcast and the stories, right? So this has really stuck to me for so many other different reasons actually. With my own situations where I wanted someone to be there when where I could really share my story with no judgments, just being there very transparent and open and very raw, which is something I really couldn't find and really get connected to even share. Probably our listeners might also relate to it. They might have had stories that they wanted to share with some learnings or with some message out of it for the other people to just have it like an insight, just like giving that spark out that this is another angle of looking at it, and letting them choose on what they want to do about it. So I think this idea has been really there on my mind, because it also got strengthened with my work with listening to people and their stories, especially when I got into the suicidal education and empowering suicidal situations, which was part of my curriculum. That's where I realized that you need that one space where you can share something and you feel heard. I think that's the idea that has stuck to me, and I think that is what gives more power to all these conversations that I have with any other human being. So when they come in as clients, I really don't feel they're clients. It's just another human being trying to just exist as they are and wanting to be accepted and heard. So I think that's the idea that has really stuck to me. That
Yeah, for me, I think places, of course, I felt connected to. And
mm,
that when I talk about place, I'm thinking about a particular place. I went on a trek, and my we were up this hill, and it was a really beautiful sight. And the guide we had, he said, this is called the Happy Hill. And I said, okay, I would just want to sit here for a little while before we continue the journey. And I remember sitting in that place, quite high altitude, and I was seeing these other hills in front of me. Absolute peace. And then I heard these laborers, probably maybe woodcutters, who were singing a folk song somewhere down the hill. And it was kind of echoing through that mountain, you know. So, though this was a place I felt highly connected to, once I moved away from that place, like after the trip was over, I came back. Somebody asked me, what's your happy place? And
mm,
immediately my mind went to that place. And I realized I hadn't ever felt so happy just being with myself
mm,
as I was feeling in that place, looking at those hills and hearing those people sing their folk song with so much love while they were working. And though it was a real place, later it became an idea for me. Anytime I had to imagine my happy place, anytime I felt I'm not feeling good today, I just had to close my eyes and that place would come
mm,
alive for me. And from a real place, it became an idea, you know, of my happy place.
mm.
And that's a connection I have truly, strongly felt. And I still carry it with me almost after 10 years of having that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. I have a similar place like that in my city I reside in, and it's just all about nature. And every day, that's my me time that I go to that place. Like you said, you need not really experience it physically. So even this moment, while I'm having conversation with you, the moment I think about that place, I am there. I'm just there experiencing that solitude version of me, just experiencing the whole nature and the beauty of it. And yeah, that's beautiful. That gives me more insights about how you have to be. in the moment. Just be very mindful and intentional of how you're living each moment, each experience, so that you're fully there, and when you want, it just comes to life.
Yeah. And we want more and more people to have such experiences, not just have, of course, they're having those experiences at some point in their life, but to be able to access it again and
Mm,
again. And I
mm,
think this stories of connection is also trying to bring that, to find your place of connection or your moment of connection. It could be a person, it could be a place, it could be an idea, it could be something that never existed, but
mm.
something that deeply connects with you. And that brings me to us introducing how we are going about with this podcast, the structure of it. Of course, this is our first episode, and we are starting with the introduction of the season. Would you like to tell about what's coming ahead, the general
Yeah,
structure that we are following?
yes. We have decided to go with the seasons. In every other quarter, we'll have one season, and each season has a specific theme with certain number of episodes with a lot of different people having to share their experiences or expertise about that topic for that particular season. And this first season is all about connection and the stories of connection. To launch it off with our special connection, creating this podcast, we're going to have episodes. We'll explore topics about genuine connections in this superficial world, like how we started having conversation about how humans have become more mechanical and they're so disconnected about their own internal world and the real relationships, which was more in the olden days and not anymore. So, how to really have those genuine connections in this superficial world, and um, how a teacher has a connection with the students, how they relate. I think that's going to be another thing.
I was just thinking after we planned, what we've come up with. There are a couple of episodes on connecting with children. One you mentioned is the teacher one, and there is another one that is with a parent and connecting through adoption as well as birth with
Yeah.
their children. And that brings me to thinking that, a child is most connected to themselves.
Mm,
And as an adult connecting with a child, how it beautifully not just transforms the child or builds the child for their tomorrow, but
mm,
also connects us back as adults to being ourselves. Um, and I'm really looking forward to those episodes. Another one I'm very excited about is the power of music that cuts across boundaries and any differences that people have. At some point, most of us would relate to some sort of music that connects deeply with us.
mm.
And you and me, we wanted to explore that. Yeah.
I think you're also looking forward to the episode where that probably will relate to you the most, of finding another home, traveling to a different country, just creating that from scratch. Probably that's going to be more close to your heart to have experienced that.
Yeah, the feeling of belongingness. You want to belong to a new place when you move away from your home, and how that journey is, to go to a new place and start over all again. And in a world
Mm,
where we are constantly moving, right? How it is to kind of navigate that. Yeah, that episode is also, I think, gonna be very interesting.
mm.
Um, what
Yeah,
about the one we thought of with connecting with your past to shape your present and future?
yeah, we cannot really forget that, because when you say about the places and the connections, I'm sure all of us connects to places we travel to and we have memories from there. So, how was it to feel or think about your own self, like your version of you in different places? It's all about you and your past experiences, which can really curate the present and the future experiences. So I am excited for the life story work and also the spiritual connection about your own self. How you're connected internally is also how you connect externally as well. At least that's the belief and the point of view I am looking at. So I am excited to have stories with
Yeah,
those
absolutely.
topics as well.
Even the biography work episode is going to be very new and interesting to a lot of people. So that is something I think our listeners can really look forward to. And most importantly, I think, is connecting with ourselves, for which we will also be having an episode on spiritual connection. And when we say spiritual connection, it's more to do with personal growth than religious connection, but it could also mean that a religious connection brings more personal growth to you. So,
Yeah.
spirituality can be defined in a very personal way, I
Mm.
feel.
Yeah, very true. That's how we can correlate connection as well. So how things are connected with your own perceptions, and it need not be really same with the perceptions that the society brings in. And it's very personal and very individualistic. Um, so I'm excited to have all these conversations. Just thinking about it makes me so good.
Yeah, I feel the same. And for our listeners, so the format is we start with an introductory episode like today, and then we have seven guest episodes, after which we will be having a very special episode where, on the theme of the season, we will go through together through an exercise of visualization or a meditation, which would be one of our episodes. So 10 episodes in all in the season is what we'll be looking at.
After hearing to this conversation. Uh, so, dear listeners, if you have been listening to this episode so far, we just want to leave you with one reflection today. Um, on how do you define a meaningful connection? We hope we sparked your curiosity through the introductory episode to the season, and hope you're looking forward to this very interesting, diverse, and insightful episodes that are lined up for you. So, if you would like to connect with us and share your feedback, we would love to hear from you. You can reach out to us on our website, www.thehumanviewpodcast.com, and all other streaming social media platforms. That's mentioned in the description. Your thoughts, your suggestions, your stories means a lot to us and will shape our future episodes of the Human Way podcast.
Next week, we will bring you our very first guest episode where we will focus on going beyond the surface and building genuine connection in a superficial world with Anup Mittal, a master coach, and more importantly, a truly authentic human being. In a time when meaningful relationships often feel out of reach, this is the conversation that will bring a breath of fresh air. Join us as we explore how to deepen our connections, reflect on ourselves, and bring renewed hope for genuine relationship into our lives. Don't forget to subscribe and tune into the Human Weave podcast every Tuesday on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. Until then, it's goodbye from your hosts, Yash and Rosh. Stay connected, stay curious.